Welcome back to the Colossal Color Showdown. This is episode 8 and we're going to start taking a look at Quinacridone Magenta. Not all brands have Quinacridone Magenta in their range. For example, M. Graham and Cassart do not have them. And I wasn't able to get hold of Permanent Magenta by Da Vinci, for which I am very sorry about. So we actually have 8 colors to compare in this episode. Quin Magenta is a funny one in that there is quite a surprisingly big difference in hue between the different brands. And I think that's because some brands do have Quinacridone Rose in their range and they want to differentiate the hue of the Quinacridone Rose from their Quinacridone Magentas, and in a lot of those brands they do take the stance that Quinacridone Magenta should be slightly on the violet side compared to the Quinacridone Rose. And that is definitely the case for brands like Daniel Smith, which is slightly on the violet side if you compare it with brands like Holbein, Winsor, Newton, Core and Mission Gold. Sennelier and Jackson's is the most violet out of the samples we have, which is further evidence that these two are made by the same people. And Schmincke is slightly on the violet side of things. What's even more interesting, and I'm so sorry that I didn't have a sample of the Da Vinci, is that their pigment is made as PV19, and that is one of the standard quinacridone pinky color, as well as PB29. That is a phthalo blues, and looking at the samples online, this probably would have been the most violet color we have on this sheet. In creating the washes, I would say that all the colors went on pretty easily. Quinacridone Magenta is one of those really easy colors to play with. If I had to be nitpicky, then I would say that Sennelier and Jackson's one is a little bit more patchy than the other colors. These two definitely suffered from being too easy to re-wet again, which has been a notable thing throughout this series, but that's only applicable if you're not used to using honey-based paints. The biggest surprise for me was how nice the Mission Gold's Magenta went down on paper. It was really smooth and silky and just went really nicely onto the paper, and it was a joy to put the color down. And that's the first time a Mission Gold color has done that for me. Now, most Quinacridone Magenta colors are just a single pigment, usually around the PV19 or the PR202 122 range, the only exception being the Da Vinci one. I really like the Holbein's Quin Magenta and Quin Magenta by Core and Mission Gold's Permanent Magenta. For me, they are more attractive as a color than the more violety Quin Magentas, but they are also very similar to Quin Roses. So if you do want a color that is different from a Quinacridone Rose, then do go for the more violety brands like Daniel Smith, Sennelier, Schmincke and Jackson's. Let's have a look at their prices. And as always, these are UK prices. I get the prices of Jackson's just so that we have a uniform price point to compare them. How expensive these colors are really depends on where you live and where you buy your color from, so do your own research if you want to get the best value for your money. For UK market, Jackson's Arts one is the cheapest with 35 pence per milliliter, and Core's one being the most expensive by being £1.31 per milliliter. In terms of alternate magenta colors, Schmincke does have a magenta as opposed to their Quin Magenta, which is PV42, as well as a purple magenta, which is PR122. PR122 being a pigment of many other Quin Magenta colors as well in other brands, so that might be fun to check out as well. Winsor & Newton also has another magenta color called the Permanent Magenta, and this is a PV19. So it's going to be closer to the violety version like the Sennelier's one and the Jackson's Arts one. I would say that if you are looking for a magenta that you can use as a primary color for mixing, I would stick with these more pinky colors than the violety colors. For creating color mixes and doing all the different primaries and stuff, you want a magenta color for the E and the slightly more violety color for the F. And if you don't know what any of this alphabets are and what I'm talking about, do check out my color theory series where I went through all of this. I'll link it up here. So you definitely want to go for the more pinkier colors like the Holbein, Winsor Newton, Core and Mission Gold's one, rather than these 4 colors. Quinacridone Magentas, by being a quinacridone, is a very transparent color, and I think you can see that on the transparency test. There's hardly any deposits. There's a slight difference in color, maybe could be called a deposit on the Mission Golds one, but they all behave pretty well. If you had to pick the most transparent, I would say the Sennelier and Jackson's and maybe the Core one, but the Core one does have a very distinct pink hue to the deposit that the other swatches don't really have. So that could be argued as a deposit and not being the most transparent. But basically, you're not going to have any transparency issues with any of the brands. Let's look at the lift and transparency test. I would say that Queen Magentas are quite staining colors on the whole. You're never going to get the paper back to white, but there are some variation in how easy these colors are to lift or how staining these colors are. You'll see the most staining of them all is Core's one. I got barely any colors off the paper from the Quartz one. So if you like highly staining colors, that's great, but if you don't, then probably avoid the Core. Senneliers and Jackson's, particularly the Sennelier one, definitely was the second most difficult colors to lift from the paper. The easiest color to lift was Holbein's one. You got nice crisp lines and the paints came off the paper consider a little bit more easier than all the other brands. In terms of glazing, Quinacridone Magentas, because they're very transparent and highly staining, they are ideal for doing glazings with. All of them glazed great. It didn't lift the colors under the fresh new wet layer that you're putting down. So you can really glaze to your heart's content and you won't have any problems. This is the last week you can sign up to receive the Phthalo Turquoise dot card that I've been showing you in this series. You get to try out 8 different artist brand Phthalo turquoises. So if you are looking for the perfect Phthalo turquoise, but you don't want to have to pay for 8 full tubes, this is a great way to be able to try real paint from all these different brands, and with lots and lots of paint. This is so much more than what you get in a normal dot card sheet, so that you have plenty for you to be able to test each of the color in every way you wanted to test before committing to buying a full tube. If you like to receive this dot card, then be sure to be signed up over on patreon.com/Oto Kano before the end of this month, and then this dot card will be at your doorstep in no time. If you are interested in comparing Queen Magentas, that will be in May. So that is the first part of our Colossal Color Showdown looking at Queen Magenta. What do you think of these colors so far? Which one has been your favorite, and has that changed from watching this episode? Do let me know in the comments down below. I've always been a fan of the Holbein's one, but that's just because I really like Holbein. However, I am becoming pleasantly surprised by how the Mission Gold is behaving so far. So we will see in the next episode whether I will change my mind about which Queen Magenta I like the most. If you enjoyed this video and found it useful, then please do give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. And do check out the Patreon page, because I put up high-res scans of all the sheets that I show you on these videos. Okay, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye!